In today's video, I have got the new Canon EOS R5 and I am going to be using it to capture some awesome daytime long exposures. Let's start off by taking a look at the shots we're going to get. So today I've cycled up to the coast at Cramond because I've had this itch to do some dramatic daytime long exposures for a while, and there's a lot of moody clouds in the sky. I think there was a storm blowing in, so it seemed like quite a good opportunity to come up and give something a go, and particularly because I'm currently testing out the Canon EOS R5, that's the 8K one for CNET. So crucially, this isn't going to be a review of that camera, just what I'm testing at the moment, so I'm not going to go heavily into its features or anything, but you will be seeing some shots taken on this camera. Now, I love doing daytime long exposures, and when they're done right, you can get these really amazing ethereal effects to shots that you just cannot get any other way. But they're not always super easy to do, so I thought it would be quite interesting for me to show how I would go about getting these sorts of shots. So as with any photo, of course, your composition is absolutely key, and you need two elements really to make a long exposure photo work. You need something which is static and something which is moving. So here, for example, we've got both those things. So we've got the static walkway with this signpost at the end, and then we've got the water and the clouds that are going to be moving all around it, and by having both of those elements together, you get the blurred motion of the water and the clouds with the walkway staying absolutely solid and pin sharp in the middle. And you absolutely have to have both of those elements. If you just took a long exposure photo of just some water, then all you get is just a big blur, and that's not a picture of anything. Similarly, a long exposure of just some rocks is going to look the same at 30 seconds long as it will at 1,000th of a second. It's static, it's not moving, there is no motion to blur along that long exposure. So it's only by combining both of those elements together that the effect actually has some impact. And that's why subjects that include water, like coasts, beaches, rivers, and in particular waterfalls, work so well. You'll see loads of pictures of waterfalls done with long exposures. I've done loads, because you get that flow of the water going over the rocks, so it's combining that moving and still element, and that's why it works. And that's exactly why I've come up to Cramond. We've got plenty of beach to explore, there's lots of rocks. The tide is pretty high, so I'm not sure we're going to get loads of good stuff, but I'm really hoping that I can get at least a couple of decent shots, which will at least show you what it is that I'm going on about. It is also pretty windy, so there is a storm blowing in, so I'm getting blown about just a little bit. Okay. Before we actually get any further though, I should probably go through some of the equipment that you're going to need if you want to do this sort of photography. Okay, should go without saying that if to take any photos, you're going to need a camera, so we can probably move straight on from that one. Now, a tripod is absolutely essential if you're going to be doing several seconds long exposure or more. You're going to need to keep your camera nice and secure. I like any one like this where the legs can splay out, because that gives you a really nice firm foundation, so even on a windy day like today, there shouldn't be much wind buffeting this around too much. Your choice of lens is absolutely irrelevant. You can do long exposure shots on a bog standard kit lens that came with your camera, or you can do it on the most expensive lens money can buy. But what you will definitely need if you want to do long exposures in the daytime is one of these. A neutral density filter. Now, this is basically just a piece of very, very dark glass. And what it does, it stops light getting into your camera, and therefore you can use very, very long exposures and your images aren't going to be completely overblown because you've balanced it out using the ND filter. Just think of it as sunglasses for your camera. Now these ones come in many different shapes and sizes. I like the square ones that are by Lee Filters. This one is a 10 stop filter, and that means it's blocking out 10 stops of light. So I can take photos of many seconds long in the middle of the day without my photos being completely overblown. But I've also got one which is 6 stops, and that helps if you want to do a shot that's maybe half a second long. I've also got Lee's Super Stopper, which blocks out 15 stops of light, and that means you can do shots of like 10-15 minutes long or longer in midday sunlight, which can lead to some really good effects. So I'll take you through my process of how I would go about getting these shots. The first thing I always do is get my composition ready before I put any filters on, because obviously these block out so much light that you aren't going to be able to properly see what you're doing through the camera lens. So in this instance, I want to use a portrait orientation because I really want the eye to be drawn down this path, which, as you can see, is starting to get swallowed up by the ocean just a little bit. But all of this on the right hand side and the left hand side is sort of wasted space. It's really the center of the frame that I'm interested in, so portrait orientation is definitely going to be best here. So I can see on live view on the camera, if we sort of focus on that a little bit, the composition that I'm going for, and once I'm happy with that, that is when I can drop the filter in. And clearly now we've got a completely black frame because it's not letting in basically any light, so we've got to drop our shutter speed right down, probably all the way to 30 seconds. And in fact, yeah, at 30 seconds, that is now looking like a well exposed frame. Actually, it's looking slightly overexposed on the histogram, so I'm going to up that aperture to f22 pretty much all the way, and then I'm going to take our shot. So I kind of like the look of that at 30 seconds, but I think with an even longer shutter speed we can get a better result because we're going to get more of that cloud as it streaks across the sky. So I'm going to take out the big stopper and put in the super stopper. That's going to let in even less light and let me use a shutter speed of probably several minutes, but we'll work that out in a moment. So Lee Filters actually has this really handy app, and what you do is if you work out what your shutter speed would be without the filter, so in this case f9 1/60th of a second would be with the 15 stop filter 3 minutes 20 seconds. So that means I don't need to guess at how long I need to take a photo for. I have literally to be able to work it out at what 15 stops would be, and hopefully that should give me the perfect shot. So let's give it a go. Now in manual mode, of course, the camera will only do a maximum of 30 seconds, so I've had to switch over to bulb exposure mode, which will just keep on taking exposure until I tell it to stop, which, as we've worked out, is 3 minutes and 20 seconds from now. By which point, this will have been completely submerged by water, as maybe will the bit that I'm standing on. So, probably going to have only the one chance to get this photo. Because the thing is, now the water has covered this concrete bit as well, we're going to get the smooth blurring of the water all the way around the sign on its concrete plinth bit. And that's going to make that really stand out and give us a very minimalist shot, which I'm quite looking forward to seeing. So I'm trying a few different exposure times because I'm not sure exactly the effects that I want. Quickest one I'm doing is around 40 seconds, but I'm doing another one which is going to be several minutes long. They are going to give quite different looks, so it's definitely good to try and do a variety wherever you are. Absolutely love the clouds we've got over here. They are so dark and menacing. They look fantastic. Over this way though, we've got lots of blue coming through, which could also be cool, but it is obviously a very different look to our bad clouds over here. I have always much preferred shooting in bad weather with big, dark, moody clouds than I have under blue skies. I think that's probably the same for most landscape photographers, but particularly in Scotland, so many of these places, they just look better under dark skies than they do under blue skies. So I just had a look at one of the shots on the back of camera and it's looking pretty good. The water is definitely very smooth, there's lovely streaks going across in those clouds. What I am going to try though, is just going to take the filter off again, and I'm going to take another shot, this time at a much faster shutter speed, just to get that cloud detail in. I don't know if I'm definitely going to do this, but what I'd like to try is blending the two shots so we get the motion of the water all blurred and smooth and looking cool, but with the nice crisp detail on these moody clouds. I think both those things together could look really cool. Here's the whole shot taken with a shutter speed of just over 3 minutes. I actually really like this shot and it's definitely my favourite from the day. I love the way the water and the sky has been smoothed out completely, which really highlights the sign in the middle. It's a really minimalist shot. And then here's the version that combines the long exposure for the water and the short exposure for the sky. It's got a very different feel to it, but I really like this too and can't quite decide whether I like it more or less than the first version. Maybe you can let me know your favourite in the comments. I've probably got all I can from that one spot, so having a little wander further down the coast, again looking out for anything that's solid and static, rock formations, concrete structures, signs, anything like that that's got the water going around it so that you get that motion blur of the water going around the static object. The tide is very much in now. It has slightly limited my shooting options, but not all is lost. I actually came up with the hope of photographing these concrete pillars because that would be an amazing subject for this sort of long exposure. I have photographed these before in a previous video, but I've not done this sort of photography with them in these conditions. So hopefully if I'm here long enough, the tide might go back down and I can give a go, because right now I can't get out to them properly, but I think I might have to be waiting quite a long time for all of this water to retreat that far. And in all honesty, much as I like trying to get the best shots for everyone on my channel, I can't be arsed waiting. I just can't. Probably here hours. I can come back though, and I probably will, because it's only about a 10-15 minute bike ride from my house. And that is the other thing actually, I cycled here, which means cycling with all my gear on my back. So I am trying to keep everything as light as possible. So I've just got the R5 with the 24-70 lens. I've not brought a super wide angle, I've not brought a telephoto. Have of course brought this video camera, which means I've got the tripod that I'm holding it with and another one, but this is a lightweight carbon fiber travel tripod, so it doesn't weigh all that much. But it is certainly, I think, the maximum amount I would really comfortably want to carry on my back while cycling. The other reason I'm not super keen on hanging around is that this storm is getting ever closer, and I'm fairly certain it's going to do something unpleasant all over me. So I'm just following the beach down now, and I'm definitely looking for more rocks. There's definitely a few sort of big piles of what could be quite interesting rocks down here. And I've tried shooting down at Cramond a few times and I found that it's a little difficult to find interesting compositions, but I'm going for quite a different look today with these very long exposures. So I actually think that coming here with a different style of photography in mind might actually be really helpful in getting something out of an area that I previously haven't been able to get much from. Or I might still find nothing. Time will tell. Because there are some big rocks over here which could look quite cool, but they are almost entirely covered. I did get this shot, which is nice enough, but it's really just a picture of a rock and doesn't really have any real focus or purpose. As a snap from the day, it's fine, but this one won't end up in my portfolio. And I think I've got at least one so far, with that sign on the bit. So I don't feel like I'm leaving completely empty-handed. I'm definitely going to come back again when the tide is playing ball a bit more and do some more with those concrete bollards, because they are the reason I came, actually, because they, I think, have the potential with a long exposure shot like we're doing today to look really, really cool. In other bad news, it's starting to rain, and judging by the clouds, I think it's going to do something pretty nasty. So probably not a bad time for me to be packing things up into what I'm hoping is a waterproof bag, but that might very well not be. So my next spot is at New Haven, because I really love the lighthouse here. We've got great light on it, great clouds in the background. So I've got my shot set up. I'm going for a fairly classic composition, pretty much like we're seeing on screen right now. And as you can see, that lighthouse stands out really, really well against the background. There's a couple of issues with doing a really long exposure here, because I want to use a long enough exposure to blur this water so we get a nice smooth flow in front of us. But obviously we've got the boats and they're moving, and so if I use too long an exposure, they're going to be very visibly blurred. So I only want to go for about a second here, which is going to make them a little bit blurred, but not too much. We're still going to have some detail. The other thing is that we do now have this amazing bank of black, stormy clouds behind the lighthouse. And if I use a really long shutter speed, say 30 seconds, then all of that detail in the clouds gets blurred out into a big mass. So again, I want to use long but not too long shutter speeds. It's always about finding a balance, and there's no set number which is always going to work. So it's about taking a few different shots. I've taken some at 30 seconds, then I've taken some at around 2 or 3. Just again experimenting and seeing what works best. But I'm probably going to get a couple more in this spot, and then I'm going to walk a little bit further around, try and get some different angles while we've still got this great light and these great clouds. With a shutter speed of a little over 1 second, I've been able to get a smooth blur on the water, but the clouds remain sharp and menacing, which I think looks great. At 30 seconds, those clouds have lost their detail and the boats in the harbour have become too blurred as well. Don't think that a longer exposure is always going to give a better result with this sort of photography. I've moved around to this side of a lighthouse because I really like the idea of getting a portrait view coming down here, getting a lot of the water in, getting some of the sky. Unfortunately, all the good cloud is sort of over this way, not so much over here, but still a little bit. So I'm giving it a go with a 3-minute exposure. We're about halfway through, which hopefully could give us something interesting. I really hope this video has been helpful to see how I would go about taking these ethereal, long exposure, blurred water shots in the daytime. If you have found this video helpful, do please hit that like button, subscribe if you don't already, and I will see you next time.